Hello, welcome. We will start the webinar webinar in 1 minute. We'll just allow a few others to come into the webinar. Okay, we've got people joining now. Great. Okay, well, we'll get underway so that we don't keep you too long. So thank you ever so much, everybody, for attending. This is a great opportunity for us as council to really share our grants programme with you so that you've got a better understanding of what grants are available and to really connect with council and ask questions and understand what grants you could apply for, how to apply for them, and have those valuable points of contact should you have questions. So we'll get underway. An acknowledgement of country. Northern Beaches Council acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather, work and play today. We acknowledge elders past, present and emerging and the spirits and ancestors of the clans that lived in this area. The Northern Beaches is a vibrant and culturally diverse community. So my name's Susie Campbell. I'm part of the Place and Economic Development team, which basically means we work with small businesses to engage with them, to support them, to educate them. We also work with chambers of commerce and community groups and councillors to really make our places where people gather and connect in our town centres a place that people want to be. And our grants are very much surrounding our town centres and supporting our businesses. I will introduce the placemaking grants and in turn we will introduce you to each of the other grant streams. So you'll have an opportunity to hear from the other types of grants available too. First of all, let me just flick through the slide. If you've got any generic questions, so not very specific to perhaps your personal situation and your grant application or your grant idea, please do feel free to pop them in the chat box. The members of the team will be on hand to answer those questions. If you have specific grant questions about your situation that is not really something that you want to perhaps share with everybody on the webinar, then please connect with us outside of this. You can, we'll share our email contacts so that you can send a message and we can have a chat with you about it afterwards. But any generic questions as we go, please answer them in the chat box. Hopefully we'll get a chance to answer them all during. If we don't, I'll address any towards the end of the presentation. So moving on to the agenda. So we're going to talk about the eligibility and what eligibility criteria there is. Now this does differ from each of the grant streams, but each grant stream will talk about it. And there is a set of eligibility criteria which is shared for each grant stream prior to you applying. We'll talk about the available funding from each. We will talk about the assessment criteria. So what sorts of things are we looking for in your application? We will then talk about Smarty Grants, which is the software that we use. It's an external software that we use for people to apply for their grant through to us. We'll talk about the key dates. And as I say, at the end, there'll be an opportunity to ask questions if you haven't already asked them during in the chat box. Okay, so there is some general eligibility which crosses the grant streams. Which is as follows. So you must acquit any previous council grant that you may have had, including proof of expenditure. So you can't have outstanding payments and invoices. Have no other outstanding debts owed to council. Again, if you have a particular circumstance that you want to discuss with us, more than happy to chat afterwards. You've got to demonstrate that the grant is actually going to be used for the purpose of the public interest and primarily for the local community, and you're not just going to pop and spend the money on yourself or your family. So it has to have a value, and we'll talk about this more as we go. Different people and different circumstances can apply for grants. So there may be businesses with an ABN. If you're not an ABN holder, perhaps you're a community group or a not-for-profit, or even some individuals that have come together in the community to do something. There are ways for you to apply as well. A statement by supplier is one option, but again, if you don't quite fit the circumstances or you're not sure, then you can connect with us afterwards and we can discuss your situation. So each of our grant streams connect to Council's Community Strategic Plan, otherwise known as the CSP. And the CSP, and I'm not going to go into it in detail, this is just to make you aware, because as you look at your individual grant guidelines, you will see reference to this CSP, and it will ask you which areas of the CSP your grant applies to. It's broken down into environmental, social, civic, and economic. And if you're following the guidelines, your grant will fall into one or more of these categories. We're not asking you to fulfill every aspect of the CSP. If you are, then your grant application probably isn't accurate. It may be that you just fall under one, and that's perfectly okay. You're not going to be judged on how many of the strategies you fall under. It's about making sure that your grant is eligible and appropriate for its purpose and meets one of our strategic goals. Some general exclusions. So we wouldn't accept a grant application for an existing service or an existing programme that council already delivers. So, you know, you wouldn't do something perhaps in a park that council already does, or there's already an event that happens each year. So we don't have duplicated events. We don't give retrospective funding. So if your activity or event or project has already happened, we wouldn't fund it. We would support you for the following year if you want to repeat it. Projects already funded by another council grant programme, so we wouldn't give you a second. Multiple applicants submitting for the same project. So it just needs to be one person from your organisation submitting. Now, that's not to say that you cannot submit two projects, but they have to be different projects and very obviously different. So if you were perhaps a larger community group and there was two things that you wanted grant money for, and perhaps they fell into different grant streams, then that's okay, but not for the same project or the same part of the same project. So if you were building a new clubhouse, it wouldn't be building the clubhouse and fitting out the clubhouse or something. So it's the same project. We don't fund operational expenses such as rent, ongoing staff wages, and insurance. We don't cover travel or accommodation expenses. We don't, in general, provide fee waivers. It may be something you've heard about in the past. What we would tend to do is if you, for example, wanted a grant that used council facilities, let's say you wanted to hire an oval or a park space or a reserve, quite often grants would waive the fees associated with hiring that venue. Now we would include that in your grant funding. So we would encourage you to list that as a cost if you know that you want to hire a community centre or something like that. You would calculate that into the value of the grant that you're requesting. We don't fund state government organisations nor political parties. Okay, so moving on to the placemaking grant. So this is my team's area. And as I said, we're all about collaboration involving businesses. We're trying to drive traffic to town centres. We're trying to help businesses to grow and thrive, to employ people locally, and you will often see activations or events happening in our town centre areas. That's there to bring people in to support those businesses. We also educate businesses through workshops. So that could be an opportunity for a grant potentially. And we often provide, excuse me, grants that maybe pilot a project or fit a local need, something that is missing in your area. And it's all about creating vibrant, connected and safe places, all about inclusion. Our grants tend to be quite small, and you will hear throughout this presentation when we talk about the value of the grants, the amounts that each grant stream will have to hand out is not confirmed. So we can only really talk about what we tend to have each year. Our grants tend to be on the smaller side, and usually around a maximum of $4,000 per application. That's not to say you can't apply for $500 or $1,000. You don't have to apply for $4,000. And it's making sure your eligibility is individuals, it could be community organisations, it could be a business chamber, any businesses that are located on the Northern Beaches LGA. Now, if perhaps you live outside of the LGA, but your grant is to benefit inside the LGA, then that's okay. But it has to support local businesses and the local town centre areas. As I say, it's generally located in a town or village centre. There may be exceptions where you're supporting businesses in a way that you don't have to locate the activation or event in the town centre. Again, happy to chat to anyone who has that situation. And it's got to fulfill a community need. The pictures are an example of a project that we worked on in Seaforth, where the landlord of those shops was struggling with graffiti, as you can see in the picture on the left. And it was unsightly, as you can see. We were getting complaints from local residents. And so we worked with him to paint a mural to beautify that place and make it a more attractive and inviting place. And if you know Seaforth, you'll see that it's still there, and touch wood, it's not been graffitied or tagged since that happened a few years ago. So that's just an example of some. And here's some further examples of place to inspire you. I'll start top left. So that was an activation around Diwali, which is the Indian Festival of Light, that was using Marathon Square in DY to share this cultural activity with members of the public. It supported the surrounding businesses where people could eat and drink and visit the area. Top right, another beautification opportunity is where we have maybe empty shop fronts, or we have construction work and the hoardings put up. We like to try and approach construction companies or real estate agents to offer to support them to decorate them in some way, so that again it avoids graffiti and vandalism. In this instance, we had local school children to do some artwork, and that was created onto a wrap and put across the hoarding, which is far more beautiful than plastered posters and graffiti. Bottom left, buskers. We quite often place buskers or have grants for people who would like to put music into town centres to enliven it. It might be associated with a particular event, for example, Christmas late night shopping, or it might be to showcase some local musicians and make the shopping experience more pleasant. Bottom right is a grant that we gave last year to an organisation in Eleanor Heights. It was a group of businesses that came together to create a Christmas market. They've done that for 2 years in a row. Extremely popular, where they close off the street and have lots of local stall holders, and locals and visitors can come and visit. So that's just a few examples of place. Now I'm going to hand you over to Paul. Paul Matthews is leading on arts and creativity grants, and he's going to share some information about those. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Susie. I'm going to hopefully take control of the slideshow now. Yes. So hi, everyone. My name is Paul Matthews. I'm the Arts and Cultural Development Officer here at Council. And so our Arts and Creativity Grant, as Susie mentioned at the beginning, the CSP, the Community Strategic Plan, our little piece of that is the arts and creativity strategy connected through creativity. And the projects that we're looking to support will feed into and support that. And I'll talk about the particular objectives that we align with on the next slide. We have two categories for our funding. We have independent projects, which is up to $5,000, and community and creative sector projects up to $10,000. A way to think about those is independent projects is something like an individual visual artist or a small band or someone who's wanting to, a craft person who's wanting to run a few workshops in one of our creative spaces. And the community and creative sector projects is more like community organizations, creative businesses who might be looking to expand their offerings. For example, a music school last year got funding to start a series of performances in their venue that they have to take advantage of that space over more hours of the day and to provide a bigger service and be able to pay musicians to perform and audiences to see more live music. So the reason we divide those two is basically about your capacity to manage a project of the scale that funding would suggest could happen. So $5,000 for independent and individuals and up to $10,000 for bigger organizations where there's a number of people who will be able to support that project. The eligibility for us is quite broad. Artists and creatives, and I've said at previous information sessions, we firmly believe that everyone can be and is creative. So it's very general. Small to medium arts and creative organizations or businesses located in the beaches. Now, as Susie mentioned, there is a caveat to that in that if you are outside the area, that you're still eligible as long as your project is directly benefiting and showing a tangible benefit to people within the LGA and creatives within the LGA. So that's the types of people that we're looking for. Now, the objectives I've got up on the screen, I won't read them all through in detail. These are all in the guidelines and in the application form. Basically, we have 7 key objectives that align with that arts and creativity strategy. And the idea is that your project would sort of align with one or more of these objectives. And again, as Susie mentioned, if you're kind of checking all the boxes, it's possible that your project isn't as focused as we'd expect from a strong application. The strongest applications tend to align with 2, maybe 3 objectives, because that's showing that you really know what your project is about, what it's doing, and who it's benefiting. So those are the objectives that we're looking at there. The assessment criteria. So this is what you'd be looking for when you actually submit an application. And in our application form, there is a question directly aligned to each of these assessment criteria. Again, I won't talk through in great detail, but basically want you to show that you know why you're doing this project, how it's benefiting the local community or how it's benefiting yourself as a creative practitioner. Connection to development is showing how how you might be connecting and collaborating with other creatives and how that might not be possible without a grant, and or how you're creating and enhancing access to the arts. So how you might be facilitating access to performance or to an exhibition or to develop a creative practice with your project. Anton, I've just seen that your hand up is hand up there. We're going to save questions to the end for general questions, but if you have a question, just pop it in the chat and I'll be able to either answer it directly or I'll be able to follow up with you another time. Experience and capacity is the third point. That's just showing that you as a creative or as an organizer or a producer has the ability to do the thing that you'll say you're going to do in the application. So that's sharing your CV, that's showing that you've got a history, a demonstrated history of producing this type of work. And so that's just for us to see that you or people within your team or you as a collective of people are able to do the things that you say you're going to do in the application. And the viability, that's just showing that you can do a clear budget and a clear project timeline. Our flag, and this is across a lot of our grant streams, in the assessment panel, they often first read the general description, see what the vibe is about, see what you're trying to achieve, and then they go straight to the budget. And they'll look at, can this person plan out? Do they know what they're talking about? Do they know how much things actually cost? Are they being practical about this as well as being aspirational? So it's that dual factor of being practical as well as, you hitting, aligning with our objectives. Now, just for an example of some of our past recipients, in the top left there is Christina Wilson, who's an emerging musician, singer, songwriter, and she got funding last year to record an EP and to enhance her live performance practice. So she's doing that. She's released the EP. She recorded it in a studio in the Beaches area. She's about to perform at Manly Art Gallery Museum as part of Creative Open, as well as a few other venues around the city. So that was to help her boost her individual career, but also to connect with a broader audience across the Beaches. The top right there is a film project. We supported a number of film projects, particularly when the crew or cast and crew are coming from within the Northern Beaches LGA. Another one that was recently done was a short film called Wax Rat by a local author. And that was filmed on location up at Palm Beach. It was great. So this is sort of really connecting with the community as well as supporting our local film industry, which is fantastic. The bottom one there is an exhibition by Susie Duro. So that was held at Curl Creative Space. So that was great. It was an exhibition that was enabled Susie to sell works and to display her work. But as you can see in that photo there, she was also holding some public programs. So that was bringing audiences into the Curl Creative Space, and it was allowing them to connect with each other, with her as an artist, to develop their own creative practices as well. So there's a huge range of projects that are able to fall within the arts and creativity grants. Okay, I believe the next grant is environmental, and I will pass that on to Renee.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Paul. So the environmental grants, seed funding projects, seed fund projects that deliver direct environmental benefit to our local environment. And by that, we want to see measurable changes, improvements and benefits across all of our three categories. So one of the key things for our program is that we're looking for projects that align with the commitments in our Protect, Create, Live environment and climate change strategy. There's a link to that document that I believe the presentation will be shared after. That's on our website as well. So I encourage anyone who's thinking of applying to have a look in there, because there's a heap of themes in there, and it talks about commitments and aspirations both for council and for the community. So we're looking to reduce our emissions across all areas, and we're looking to improve, increase, retain our natural areas, things like that. So I really encourage you to have a look there, because that's very highly regarded if you can show how you're meeting those aspirations and commitments. At the moment, we usually run a program of grants of up to $5,000. As somebody's already said, that'll be dependent upon our budget that gets accepted this year. So we usually have a pool of about 50,000. So grants up to 5,000 per project, but it can be any varying amount. If it's a smaller project, it can be less. You can apply for any amount up to 5,000. So the three categories that our applications come in for are restoration and environmental protection projects. So we've had quite a number of bushland projects like bushland restoration, creek bank restoration, lots of projects like that over time, resource efficiency and sustainability projects. So we've had quite a number of community garden projects where they've increased their the use of water and things like that, and also sustainability education and community engagement across all areas. So we've got a great project running at the moment, which is doing education for solar installations across the LGA, and that's a big focus of our Protect, Create, Live environment and climate change strategy, is to be achieving those goals and reducing our carbon emissions. So yeah, there's some pictures here of our past recipients. So that's one of our community gardens on the top left. We've got some bush regeners down in the bottom right there, getting stuck into our local bushland, removing weeds. We've had similar projects of people going into the bush and literally just taking loads and loads of waste out of Dee Why Lagoon, which was a great project. Top right, solar installations. So we've had quite a few of our surf lifesaving clubs have installed solar on their roofs, which has been great, and they've had some great data around that. As far as eligibility goes for our program. So incorporated not-for-profit organisations are eligible, and all other types of community organisations, unincorporated groups, individuals and sole traders, but they have to be sponsored or auspiced by a not-for-profit organisation that's in the sector. So if you think that's confusing, have a look at the guidelines. Feel free to give me a call or send an email to environmental grants at council, and I'm happy to chat to you about it. But basically, you've got to be a not-for-profit group or an unincorporated group sponsored by a not-for-profit. And so, yeah, we're looking at that program at the moment. Hopefully we'll get lots of good applications this year. As far as the assessment criteria, so we need to see a clear rationale for the deliverables in the project, like why you're doing the project, what the outcomes will be, a demonstrated positive environmental impact, as I've discussed, capacity of your organisation to deliver that project, a realistic budget, so similar to others, and some highly regarded criteria to consider if you're applying is evidence of partnerships with other organisations. So that is really highly regarded. So it's great when we see multiple organisations coming together, which is increases capacity and knowledge across our community. We also love to see applications that address more than one category or priority. And particularly we like to see experimental, innovative ideas and approaches. So, and how long the project will last for, so the longevity of the project, that will score really highly if it's something that's going to have a compounding impact over time and show benefit into the future. So yeah, please get in touch if you have any other questions, and I'll check the chat if there's anything for us. And I'm going to hand over now to Jacinta from our Open Space and Recreation team.
Hello all, thanks for jumping on. Sport and Rec. So we offer grants from a minimum of 10,000. So unlike other ones, we have a minimum grant amount to the maximum of 35,000. Again, similar to other grants in that we don't have our budget set yet, hoping to pass that in the June council meeting. But in previous years, we've had a funding pool of $100,000. So hoping for the same again this year. That usually means we can give out anywhere between, I don't know, 3 grants, and sometimes we've given upwards of 8 out for that funding period. Our grants are specific around infrastructure. So we're looking for infrastructure improvements or new infrastructure on council-owned or managed land. So that's quite specific in that it can't be a privately owned bowls club or anything like that. It needs to be council property or land. And your project needs to address one or more of our 3 program objectives, that being increase opportunity for participation in sport, recreation and active play, improve the viability of a sport and recreation group, or develop safe and accessible family-friendly facilities. As I said, has to be for new or existing infrastructure and council owned or managed land. When you do start looking at your application, definitely highlight why you need your project. A lot of times it may seem obvious, but the more information that you can kind of provide, the better. You've got to remember that our assessment panel can be looking upwards of 40 applications. That can be quite, I guess, generic in some of the requests. So really sell your point as to why it's needed. A good example is every club needs storage. I don't know a Northern Beaches club out there that doesn't have a cry out for more storage. However, storage is going to be a hard sell because it's great for a club, but does it really have community need? So if you can think of a project that has community need, the stronger it's going to be. On the storage example, we had a club a few years ago get a grant for storage increase because they could say that by having increased storage, it meant that all their equipment moved out of the change room into a designated area and meant the change room could then be freed up for more junior participants and female-friendly facilities. So that was good like that. Another good thing to add to your application are photos. So especially if it's going to be an upgrade of an existing facility. A common request we get resurfacing tennis courts because they've started to become past their use by date. There's big cracks in it. If you can show us how depleted they are and how much you really need a new surface, that's always beneficial as well. The more community members you can get involved, or the more letters of support you can get to, the stronger the application. So think about if you've got outside users or other groups using your facility, or that would benefit from your project. Definitely include letters of support, or how that may impact them as well in a positive way. The biggest call out that we can say is to please make sure you submit your application with owner's consent. So you'll see in the grant guidelines there's a piece around owner's consent, which basically you will need to fill out a form that will then go to one of our teams, whether it's park assets or property, depending on your project. They will look at your project, make sure it's viable and it's in line with everything that we need. And then they will give you a letter saying, yep, we give you consent to apply for this grant, and conditional consent for the project. That just makes sure that we're not going to be funding a project that wouldn't be within council's best interest or given permission. Please allow for 10 working days for that approval to come once you've submitted the form. So I dare say start that process early. Have a look on our website. We're going to have the grant guidelines up hopefully by the end of this week. Have a look through all that process, and if you have any questions at all, please reach out, and I can give you some extra information on that. Just to give you an idea of some of the projects that we've funded in the past, last year we funded Avalon Pickleball. They put in a request for additional storage facilities on sandstone blocks for seating, which is obviously beneficial for the entire community because anybody using the courts could then obviously have seats. And they've also requested for a path to go through where it's typically muddy after rain. Again, increases accessibility, especially for people with prams or with mobility issues. We gave a grant to Archery, again, to put in a footpath from their car park up to their shooting range, again, to increase accessibility, and to put an awning over their target range. So it meant that it gave them a more all-weather option when it came to using their facilities. We gave a grant to the Pony Club to redo their cross-country course, which was really good because it meant that the course was then a lot safer to what it was before. They were really proactive in that they had a study done to show what was needed and to really highlight the concerns. So it was really easy to see the need for that project. And then we gave cricket, a cricket club, a grant to put an awning over their barbecue area. Again, benefits the entire community because next to a playground, people and family members can use it, tennis courts and the like. So if you've got any questions around the sports and rec grants, please reach out. But otherwise, I will now hand over to the next grant giver.
Thank you, Jacinda. My name is Natalia. I'm from the Community Development Grants Program. Okay, I think we're on the slide. What is community development? Community development is a broad approach to working with communities in the pursuit of social justice. So really creating fair and inclusive society with an equitable distribution of resources and opportunities. Our team works with local groups in the social services sector to build capacity. And our work has a particular focus on improving the lives of residents who are young people, so 12 to 24, older people, people from First Nations backgrounds, LGBTQ+ community, multicultural communities, people living with a disability, or people experiencing domestic violence or mental ill health. Our grant program has two categories. So we'll have the small grants program for up to $5,000, as well as the community development category with up to 10,000. In terms of eligibility, you're eligible if you're part of a community group, and that definition is any group that is more than 2 people coming together for a cause, and organizations, or if you're a social enterprise or an incorporated or also an unincorporated non-for-profit organizations. If you want to go for the community development grants, so up to $10,000, you need to be incorporated non-for-profit. All the other entities can go for a small grant. Here. Our priorities for the community development category this year are twofold. The first one is really targeted at Council's newly adopted multicultural inclusion plan. That plan has really two strategies or two directions. The first one is to celebrate diversity and cultural expression, and the second one is to make people safe, connected, and included in community life on the Northern Beaches. So your projects either need to fulfill that direction, or the second one is a bit broader, that really is projects that build community connections for any of the following. And then we have a few of our priority populations listed there, and the ones I just mentioned, or also intergroup connections between our diverse communities, or intergenerational connections. So this is really a broader category focusing on connections. For our small grants category, that really is seed funding to help maintain or grow your community groups, services, activities with a focus on inclusion, participation, on social connection. So again, quite broadly written for you to find your niche project that fits within. I'll just briefly mention our assessment criteria. Across both of the categories, what we're really looking for is, first of all, that they meet the funding priorities, and that's why they're on purpose a little bit broad. Then we really need to know the rationale. So why is your project needed? What does the community need? And why has that not been met through other existing services or programs? And the other really important aspect is to have a sound budget. That was mentioned in previous grant categories as well. It really needs to be a bit detailed, so we understand what the money is actually spent for. We need to see that there is some value for money from Council's perspective. And what also is always positively evaluated is there's a section where you can put your in-kind contribution to the projects in. So that's your volunteer time or other things that you give in kind to the project. In terms of examples of projects that have been previously funded, at the top left, yes, we have a local not-for-profit in the youth mental health space. So they got funding for a peer support program focusing on youth mental health. Then the picnic that you can see, that was funded last year, a Fusion Pride picnic at DY Stand to celebrate and show support for the LGBTQI+ communities and their families on the Northern Beaches, and raise awareness for local support organizations. We then have at the bottom left Artability, which is a non-for-profit arts program that provides comprehensive arts program focusing on social inclusion for the Northern Beaches disability community, for people that have severe intellectual and physical disabilities. And then on the bottom right is the Manly Wheelchair Basketball Association. They were funded last year for their basketball program, training program that provides free training and membership for people in wheelchairs, and their trainers includes local Paralympians as volunteer coaches. That was it from community development, and I'm handing back over to Susie.
Thanks, Natalia. Okay. Okay. Can everybody, am I okay online? I think I've taken that back on. Okay, so I've talked about in the beginning about Smarty Grants, which is the platform we use to apply for grants. And this is what you will see when you log in. So first of all, you've got to create your own login. Now, what I want to say is Smarty Grants is fairly user-friendly. It's not difficult. It doesn't look pretty, but it's pretty simple to use. But what I recommend is that if you are interested in applying for a grant, and even if you're not sure of all the detail yet of your idea, I highly recommend that you create your own login and then look through all the questions for your grant. Because ultimately, if you hit a question that you are not sure of and you need some more information, you've then got time to go to that relevant grant stream and ask those questions early. One of the reasons we're doing these workshops and webinars is to connect with people early so that you can ask these questions and not leave your application till the last minute or miss out because you're struggling with the application and you haven't had chance to ask those questions. So do look through Smarty Grants, look at the questions. It gives you an opportunity to save as you go. So you might just want to fill in your personal details and contact details and things first. And you can hit save. You can also download a preview of your form. That might be useful if you're working with somebody else on the application, and you can perhaps share and discuss what you're going to put in those boxes and preview it as you go. I don't recommend you share logins with other people because that potentially could lose. But do log in, have a go, save it as you go. And then at the end, we're going to share all the contact details of the grant streams so that you can connect with them if you've got questions prior. Okay. So Smarty Grants, as I say, it's fairly straightforward. It's going to ask you for some details, some contact details. Do make sure those details are accurate, because quite often, if you submit your grant in good time, and we really encourage you to do so, it gives us the opportunity to have a little look at the applications as they come in. And if we can spot that you've missed some crucial information, or perhaps there's something we don't fully understand, we can contact you before it goes to the panel. Because once it's at the panel, we can't affect or change anything. So this is our opportunity to check that, and we can contact you. So please make sure they are accurate. We want to understand what your idea is. Literally tell us, what is your idea? Explain it as if you're explaining it to a stranger in the street. What is your idea? Keep it fairly simple. You don't have to give us pages and pages, and quite often there's word counts in the sections, but be really clear on what it is you want to do and why your idea is good. What do you want to do and why do you want to do it? Who's it going to help? Who's it going to support? What difference or impact is it going to make? It's really important that you share that with us. And what do you need from us as council? What will you do with the help? So you may simply want some advice from us, and that's totally okay. And again, we'll share contacts so you can talk to us. But if there's something you need from council, and maybe you don't understand whether that's something we can help with or can provide, put it in there. And again, we can contact you if it's not something we could support with. Okay, some of the key dates. This is quite important. Again, as I said, we've run these sessions early to give you an opportunity to consider your ideas. Perhaps you've got committee meetings that you want to discuss your ideas before the applications open towards the end of this month, 27th of June. Noting that the sports and recreation grants do open 2 days later. Then the closing date is the 5th of August. Again, Sports and Rec does close a few days later on the 9th of August. So it's a 6-week window. Please do not try and leave it till the last day, because as I said, we don't have an opportunity to then to review it and to contact you and ask you to change things. So please do try and submit early and talk to us early. What happens next is once the applications close, there is no opportunity to change, and that is when they go to a panel. This is an independent panel, usually made up of 3 or more people. It could be members from council, it could be councillors, it could be someone from a community organisation. Each grant stream differs on who they bring together, but it's about having some fresh eyes on your idea and not just the people who are running the grant. so that we can really bring that fresh pair of eyes to your idea and understand what it is you're trying to do. And they're all then scored independently. So each person will score each grant separately to make it fair. And then we come together to look at our collective scores to agree whether we can fund or perhaps partially fund your grant. On that point, sometimes a grant, and again, sometimes it differs slightly from grant to grant. If you read in the eligibility criteria, we might not be able to give you the full amount that you've requested, but we can give you some, and you would be told that in the response. Please also be aware that you won't hear whether you're successful or not until November. So bear that in mind with whatever your project is. So if your project needs to happen before November, then this grant stream is too late for that project. You would need to apply for next year for a future project. So do be aware of that. And then project delivery. So you would start either delivering your event or your activation or whatever it might be, happens. And then your completion of your project that the grant is used for, again, the closure of that might vary. Some streams will have a date that you have to deliver it by. They may be able to flex and extend under certain circumstances. But again, if you've got questions around that and you know that your grant might take
Hi, folks. We're just aware that Susie's screen has frozen. A couple of us have got a frozen screen from her in the back end. So what I will do is I will try and pick up from where Susie left off. And we'll see if Susie can jump back in online by the end. So I'll grab control of the other slideshow again. There we go. Okay, so as Susie was saying, project delivery is from December. Well, it's basically for many of the grants, as soon as you've signed a funding agreement and returned a valid invoice, you'll be able to start delivering your grant, your project. And then the end date for each of those projects does differ from grant to grant. So for example, for placemaking, it's the end of the financial year, so it'll be the end of July. End of June. However, for something like arts and creativity grants or community grants, it's the calendar year. So it's the 31st of December, 2025. And then following that, there'll be an acquittal period where you will see, where you'll be basically delivering a report on how your grant went, how many people turned up, how the money was spent, providing proof of expenses, all that sort of thing. But that information will be provided to you at the time that you are given the grant. So there's a few places.
Thanks so much, Paul.
No worries.
I was kicked off. I'll let you carry on if you'd like.
No, you're welcome to. I just got up to the additional resources, to the grant resources. If
I've had to jump on another computer, so I'm afraid my camera, I don't even know where the camera is. It's over there. That's all right. Sorry, I'm not going to face you. These are just some useful resources. So the top one goes to all the council grant resources. So I'm just going to move this because that's probably very off-putting. Let me just move myself over a little bit. It's all the grant resources and information. And again, it might answer some of your questions, but of course, we encourage you to connect with us with questions. Grant Guru is another useful website that lists grant opportunities. So if you are looking for other grants other than council, then that's another good option to look for. Granted is a relatively new site. This tends to focus on grant applications and how to write a grant application, but again, might be useful for your group in the future. Key contacts. This is really important. We're really keen to share this with you. This is all the email contacts for each of the grant streams that we've talked about today. So Paul and Natalia and Georgia head up community development, Renee for environmental, myself for placemaking, and Jacinta for sports and rec. So please take that. We will send a recording of this webinar out, so you will be able to check this if you don't have chance to screenshot or scribble this down at the moment. If you are if you look on the council website, we'll also share this recording on the council website, but it will get emailed out to everybody who's registered for either the workshops or the webinars. So, a few things to remember. Be aware of the eligibility criteria. So do read the guidelines for the grant that you're looking to apply for. And if in doubt, contact us. Don't forget the grant closing date, again, on the 9th for sports and rec. And don't be disheartened if you don't get your grant. The grants are competitive. We do get an awful lot of grant applications for some of the streams, certainly, and we only have a finite amount of money for them. So we do try to share that money around to as many applicants as possible. So we wouldn't just give a large amount to one if we had another 20 applicants and only a small budget. So be prepared for perhaps not being fully funded, but equally be prepared for us not able to support your grant this time. Thank you ever so much, everybody. I know there's been a few questions throughout. Apologies for that slight blip. And thank you, Paul, for jumping in there for me. If anybody has any general questions at this point, very happy to take questions in the chat box. Otherwise, as I say, connect with us, ask as many questions as you need to make sure your grant is as strong as possible. Our aim is to spend this money. We don't want to have to give the money back. This money is allocated for people like yourselves, groups, community groups, the public, to bring something positive and good to the beaches. And it's really important to us as the grant streams to see some of these amazing ideas and projects come to life and really support our community. So our aim is to spend it, not to keep it. So we'd love to get some great ideas and applications. Okay, I'm just going to see if we've got any questions at the moment. No. Okay, we will finish up there. Oh, Jill, you have a question. Can you pop it into the chat box for me, Jill? That would be fantastic. And Lois, that would be amazing. So anyone with questions, we will stay on for a few moments to answer generic questions. If they're personal and specific to your situation and your grant, I recommend you use the emails. I'll just bring those back up there for anybody. So anybody with their hands up, please pop your question in the chat box. No, okay, I'm going to finish up now and hopefully you can pop an email to the contacts with further questions. Thanks everybody again, and looking forward to seeing the applications.